welcome to the Practical Animal Channel with me, John Beaumont. Today's video is for you if you enjoy listening to discussions about animals, or you nurse ambitions to work with animals, and you want to know what personal skills and qualities are needed to work with animals. Each week we carry out an interview with an animal industry professional, and today's topic is with Mr. Edouard Crittenden, who is a herpetologist working with venomous snakes. Ed, welcome to the Practical Animal Channel.
Hi, nice to be here.
Thanks for coming, Ed. Ed, can you describe, first of all, what does a typical day involve for you?
So a typical day is obviously kind of going into work, your initial checks, checking around all the animal rooms within my facility, unlocking it and doing an environment check. So the first thing we always do is go in, make sure our environmental temperatures are in range, the humidity is, and the health of the animals. So that's just walking around the facility, checking everything's fine, that there's no weird smells, that it doesn't feel cold, that it doesn't feel too humid, and record all the environmental information down. And then it depends on the day of the week, effectively. So I might have some feeding to do that week, which I'll try and get the feeds out early in the morning to defrost throughout the day. Or it could just be general cleaning within the collection. So unfortunately, well, not even unfortunately, but the bulk of my job is just cleaning out animals. Obviously, the venomous side of it adds some extra precautions needed and challenges. But at the base of it, I clean out a lot of animals most of my days and clean the facility. And then occasionally we'll do some venom extractions on our animals or various other research aspects. Unfortunately, due to COVID, we're not doing any extractions at the moment. The hospitals are a bit busy, so the last thing they want is one of us to turn up needing a ventilator or something like that. A snake bite would be a very staff-intensive issue, so we unfortunately had to pause our extractions. But twice a week we aim to do pre-COVID. So twice a week we aim to do extractions on whatever needed doing that extraction or whatever's needed for our researchers over in the lab team.
I'm going to add a little bit of context here, which I missed out of the original introduction, and that is that you are a herpetologist with, now let me get this right off the top of my head, you are a herpetologist with the Centre for Snake Venom Research and Intervention. Is that correct?
So I work at the Centre for Snakebite Research and Interventions. It was close. So yeah, we're part of the Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, and we specialise in snakebite. We're one of the few centres actually that has a herpetarium attached to it as well. So we have effectively our own source of venom. Now that's quite rare within the research community. Most people buy in their venom purely because managing a large collection is very time intensive. You've got additional risks of venomous animals. You need to be able to process the venom as well, which you need kind of freeze drying machines. You need specialist equipment, effectively, really accurate scales, your air extraction so that you're not breathing in the particles of venom and stuff. So we're very lucky to have this resource attached to us, but it does come at quite a high cost for both staff and for putting in money for grants and stuff. But the benefit is we get fresh venom effectively, and we can collect as much as we can off our snakes and target it towards our research.
Now, I've been around a bit, and I remember from our correspondence that if I remember rightly, your centre has two government approvals: the Home Office and is it the Animal and Plant Health Agency?
So we are a Home Office approved licensed research facility. So we fall under the Animal Scientific Procedures Act. It's a very stringent set of laws for any research being done in the UK. as with most of our animal laws in the UK, actually we're world leaders in this. Now it does add a lot of challenges to managing that collection. Obviously, being Home Office accredited, we can get inspected at any point. So a Home Office inspector comes in, checks the welfare of the animals, the establishment, making sure we're recording everything that we're required to. Under the ASPA guidelines, you have to have named delegated people. So I'm currently the deputy of our facility, but currently while I'm in work, I'm the named animal care and welfare officer for our animals. So this means that if there's any issues on the welfare of the animals, the facility, the Home Office inspector will have to come to me. I have to explain why I've done this and make sure that the animal's care and welfare is at the highest possible standards. Now, ASPA itself is quite a challenging law to work under. It supersedes the Animal Welfare Act, for example. So we don't work under the 5 freedoms. We work under the 3 R's. They always love those little acronyms. So we work under replacement, refinement, reduction. So replacing animal models where possible, refining the procedures to cause as little stress, harm, distress to the animals as possible, just to make it as easy as possible. So, for example, if you're taking a blood sample from an animal, you need to make sure that it's the exact gauge that causes the least harm to the animal. I've done replacement, refinement, reduction, so reducing the amount of animals that you need to use. So, for example, if you can refine your procedure down to 20 animals instead of 50 animals, you should be aiming for those 20 animals. You should always be refining the process. Now, unfortunately, research animals is quite a touchy subject, and that has reasons, but obviously what you see out in the media or on the internet is quite dated now. ASPA itself is quite restrictive, not secretive, but you don't really shout from the rooftops you've got it. But the whole motivation behind the ASPA research is to make sure the animals are at the best care and welfare possible, which is always the core. The core of any animal work should be is that the welfare in the animal's life is as best as possible. Now, obviously, in an ideal world, we wouldn't need to bring in snakes. Unfortunately, we do need wild caught snakes. So bringing them in, it's trying to make it as best a life as possible in the circumstances. So we try and bring in only as many snakes as we need, and we try interventions to make sure that the snakes that we've got are in the best health. So that could be veterinary treatment, that could be changing how we care for them. But it's always that core ethos of making sure that the welfare is there. The Home Office will come and inspect us, and we've got a welfare and ethics committee within the university that meets every quarter, and we have to discuss the animal welfare within the school. And it is quite a fundamental part of research. It allows us to do our research in the best practical ways. So it has driven, for example, the need to refine procedures. It makes people think further about what they need to do if it's necessary. So obviously we are under the branch of research, but we're effectively the only place that does research on animals under ASPA in the UK. So we're a bit special in that sense. In the Home Office, when they come up, it's more of an open discussion about how we're working instead of these are your strict guidelines, work within these, which you'll get for a lot of the mammal species.
You're obviously in an extremely unique position, and you've got a fascinating job as a herpetologist. Can you describe how your career progressed to where you are today, please?
So I've always had a passion for animals. It was always going to be something I wanted to do. But my career path going through school, it was always you need to go to university, you need to get a degree to go on to do further work. And unfortunately, I messed up my A-levels. Same story as most people, just didn't take it seriously enough. Some personal issues got in the way and stuff. So my original plan throughout school was to get my A-levels, go on to do a degree, probably end up at Bangor University doing herpetology, funny enough, but not in snakes. My main interest was crocodilians. Snakes were just kind of that. They're cool, but they're not quite crocodiles, are they? You know, they were the ones that I really enjoyed. And when I was working in a pub at the same time, so I was doing college, working in a pub, messed up my A-levels, and just kind of worked in the pub for a bit longer, just kind of drifting, not doing much. So I went and volunteered in South Africa for 2 months. I originally wanted to go to the Madras Crocodile Blank, work with crocodiles, but facility in South Africa got back to me first, and I went over there for 2 months. So I volunteered at a reptile sanctuary. I didn't really have much reptile experience, if I'm honest. It was one of those, I'd love to look at them in books, but I'd handled a couple of people's royal pythons and corn snakes. Ended up in South Africa on my own at 19, walking through, ended up in a small little centre in a town called Hoedspruit. So it's a tiny little town, about an hour from Kruger. And when I was out there, they were just kind of like, learn to handle snakes. So I did. So I started learning to handle stuff, and I was working with, looking back on it now, every time I look back, I was clueless to what I know now. So I was working with like yellow anacondas, thinking this is really cool. And like South African rock pythons and things like that, things that most people would avoid naturally. So I learned how to use basic tools like tongs and hooks and stuff. And I was there for about 2 weeks, and I'm like, do you want to learn how to handle venomous? Why not? What can go wrong? So with the grab sticks, it was kind of, if you can pick up an egg with a grab stick, you'll learn, just practice with them a couple of times so you know the strength to use. So with tongs, if you push too hard, you're effectively, if you've got a snake there, you'll break its bones. So you need to know the amount of force you put on it. So picking up an egg is a good example. If you can pick up an egg and hold it in the tongs, you should be fine with a snake. So one afternoon, the park was a bit quiet, and they were just kind of like, well, come on then. And there were 3 boxes, and in the 3 boxes, there was a snouted cobra, a puff adder, and a boomslang. Me in my oblivious ways was like, yeah, fine, just go and do it. So in 15 minutes on this afternoon, 2 weeks after starting to handle, I was handling a puff adder, a snouted cobra, and a boomslang like it was nothing, absolutely nothing. And then kind of a week after, you go around with the curators. You don't handle on your own, but just how you get going, see how you do. And you do stuff like cage maintenance, interact with the public. So after about a week, they were like, yeah, you're fine, just go and handle. So I'd be going around moving snouted cobras into boxes for them and stuff. And normally within Venomous, when people were introduced into Venomous, it's a long, drawn-out process. Like you start here with non-venomous, and you move up this ladder. 2 weeks after learning to handle, I was handling green mambas, which are quite a high caliber of snake. Oblivious again, completely oblivious to the dangers of what the venom could do. I was just kind of like, oh, this is quite cool. Don't get bitten, it's fine. Hospital's far away. So effectively 2 weeks after learning to handle venomous, 6 weeks after learning how to use tools, I handled my first black mamba. And again, it was one of those really, wow, this is a cool snake. It's a big snake. It's heavy. Completely oblivious to what I was actually doing. And throughout my 2 months there, we went on snake call outs and stuff like that. They had some gnarled crocs that you'd go and rake out the enclosure, but the crocs were still in there. So the advice was chuck your bin bag over this 6-foot wall and then climb the nearest tree. And again, it was like, yeah, this is great. Looking back at it, I had a rake, and there was a 2.5, 3 meter gnarled crocodile just chilling. So the danger, I'm glad I was oblivious because it allowed me to get a lot done. But that was my first proper interaction with reptiles as a whole. So I was working with lizards, chameleons, crocodilians, tortoises, snakes. There's some alligator snapping turtles and all sorts that people have had as pets, given up, and the sanctuary taken in. So I had this really weird introduction, came back to the UK, working at a pub, and it's quite boring after that, I'll be honest. It is really quite boring. So I wasn't really sure what I was doing, and there was a job that came up at an animal facility near me for an animal tech. And it was one of those, I'll give it a go, I'll apply, see what it's like, went for an interview. It was a 2-hour interview for this position, and it was quite a tough interview as well for the position it was as junior tech. So I'd interviewed for a pub beforehand, for a Wetherspoons. It's an easy interview, 2-hour interview questioning why you want to work with animals and stuff. So it was quite an intense interview, and I did get the job. And I spent 2 years working there as an animal tech. So I started as a junior and left as a licensed animal technician. So under ASPA, you need to be licensed to do animal procedures, which vary from just simple blood draws to actually dosing an animal. So you need to be a licensed technician for that. So I gained my license. That's what I was aiming for. I wanted to get my license, got it. And while I was there, I worked across the site. So I'd worked with beagles, mini pigs, rats, rabbits, 2 species of primate, all sorts, in various different dosing routes. So I got a lot of different experience with mammals. And I saw a job. I wasn't overly happy there. It was basically husbandry all day, but very intense, lots of hours. I was looking for a job, and there was one up in Liverpool. It was just herpetologist and animal technician. I'm an animal technician. I've had some reptile experience. I like snakes. They were venomous. I'll apply. Again, not really thinking much, just see what comes about from it. And subsequently, it turned out there was about 140 people applying for one position, because there's just no other role like it really in the UK. It's a very specialized role. Previously, the guy I worked with, Paul, has been doing the job for 28 years. And for most of those, he's been doing it on his own. So getting an assistant in isn't easy. It's quite a long process of training up someone and making sure that they'll stay long enough that it's worth putting the training into them. So luckily I got offered the job, moved up to Liverpool, and I've been up here for over 3 years now. And since then I've just worked at the School of Tropical Medicine. Basically I've worked with snakes and mice. That's the 2 animals I work with now. But yeah, that was my progress up to this position. And then from the net for the foreseeable future, I can't see myself moving anywhere. This is such a unique job, and the interactions I get with the species I work with, the research is so fascinating. I was very lucky, I'll put it that way. Managed to stumble into a very good position for myself.
It certainly sounds absolutely fascinating. Please, can you tell us the skill sets and the personal qualities that somebody in your position working with venomous snakes needs?
So I mean, working with animals in general, taking away the venomous aspect, it's more of a lifestyle than a job. I've always seen it as that, because you've got animals in your care. Animal people, from what I've met, most of the animal people I know aren't really the best people. We interact with animals really well. For me personally, I've always been around animals. I've always enjoyed working with them. So that kind of lifestyle is fitted with me. I'm more than happy to dedicate a lot of my time to making sure the animals that I look after are very, well, as best as I can cared for. And part of that is a personal drive to make sure that the welfare of the animals is the key point of why you do your work. For me personally, animal welfare and intelligence in animals is what fascinates me. I love most things about animals, but that finding the intelligence in an animal, especially animals people don't think are smart, or doing the improvements in the welfare and seeing it pay off by the difference in the behavior of the animal, or making changes that you know has improved that animal's life. So they're a big driving part of my motivation. And I feel that across the board with most people about working with animals, it's that passion that you've got behind it to make sure that the animals in your care are cared for as best as possible, but to the best of your abilities. And if that means that you dedicate more hours than you're paid for every day, then you will, because you want to make sure that they're as best looked after as possible. And if someone comes and sees your facility, you want it to reflect the time that you've put into the animals, so that when someone comes in, they can see that the animals are in good health, that they're, I don't want to say happy, because doesn't feel like the best term, but content in what they've got, that you're maximizing what they've got at that point. So it could just be putting an extra hide into a box, and that could make all the difference for that animal. It's now got more choices to use. It can climb on different levels, or putting a simple branch into a cage. It doesn't sound like much, but for that animal, you've now offered it new levels. So that drive, I feel, is a big part of the skill set needed to work with animals. Then getting onto the venomous side of it, that in itself is a very different subset. You need to be comfortable working in temperatures. So all of our snake rooms are 26 degrees and above, between 26 and 30 degrees. Most of the rooms are sat at about 50, 60 to about 80% humidity. You'll be working in those for long hours, and it's quite physically taxing. So you need to be able to work in the conditions that the animals are kept in, and you need that, not necessarily physical strength, but you need to be able to deal with a lot of quite manual labor. So that is one of the skill sets that I feel is quite needed. But then on top of that, with the venomous, you've obviously got to have really good coordination with yourself. So your hand-eye coordination has got to be good reflexes, obviously, and confidence in yourself. It's very easy to say that you have handled venomous snakes or something like that. If you go to a facility where they do a taste a day, it's very easy to go and handle a snake when there's multiple people around you who can deal with the snake if it goes wrong. It's having the confidence in your own skills that you know you can deal with anything that comes up. So with COVID at the moment, typically there was 2 of us working in the herpetarium at all times. Now, unfortunately, to keep us separate in case one of us gets sick, someone else can look after the animals. We've been working independently for just under a year, now. And previously, before that, I'd always had Paul as a backup, and then suddenly it was me on my own. And I have my confidence in my skills, but it's proving that confidence to yourself, knowing that no matter what happens, you can deal with it. So even if you're, an example would be, we got some new snakes in over Christmas from East Watini. We got 2 black mambas in there, and they're wild caught animals. They're big. They know their potential. They will throw themselves about and push you out of a room, which did happen to me, unfortunately. One of the mambas chased me out of the room, so I had to close the door, watch it, and it sat staring at you through the window and stuff. And it's that ability to go back into that situation and say, you calm yourself down, you take a minute, and then you just kind of like, right, I've got to put that away. You can do it. You've got to have that confidence in yourself to know that you'll go and put yourself in that position, because one wrong move can end you up in a very serious state. And it's constantly having that mental note that any one mistake you make could effectively change your whole life. So you've got to be able to deal with that pressure that you're constantly underworking, and you've got time constraints as well to work within. So we'll only handle between 9 and 5 when there's a second person on site. So if there is a bite, someone else can look after you effectively. So you're within a time constraint. Obviously, being in a university, it's not just looking after the snakes. You've got meetings here and there. So you might be trying to feed out, and you've got half an hour to feed out between meetings. So then instead of being able to rush through, you've still got to take that time of, am I actually safe to be able to feed out everything in one go? Do I need to split it in half? Do I need to potentially not feed certain animals today because of the potential? So you might be done in 10 minutes. But if you hadn't planned for that and it took longer, you then have to rush later in the day. And rushing around venomous is not a very good idea at all. So you need, in terms of skill set, it's such a varied skill set that you draw on. So it's not just animal work. It's not just reading the animals, but also knowing how far you can push yourself safely, trusting in yourself. So little things like making sure that your footing is always short without actually thinking about it, just knowing that when you place a foot down, you're not going to buckle or something like that. It might sound a bit strange, but it's little things like that, knowing exactly what's behind you without really having the chance to look. So you might drop a tool that you're using to pin an animal. So you've dropped your hook, and now you've had to move forward. Now, if you step back, you don't step on your hook and then lose your footing, which if you're dealing with a venomous, the last thing you want to do is fall on the floor. So there's a lot of situational awareness, hand-eye coordination, and the ability to adapt very quickly. So things can change. Working with animals, you can make 5 plans. The animal will take the 6th plan that you haven't thought of. But you've got to try and cover all your bases. So it could be that you're just handling one snake, but you need a change of substrate. You need a fresh box ready. You need a water pot in the room just in case you're changing boxes. Is there a box you can reach straight away without leaving the animal loose? Can you reach this point while holding the snake here? Things like that. Just positioning things around you and being aware where you positioned it. Because the last thing you want to do is put your hook against the wall, be doing something, and then you go to reach for your hook and it's not there. It's quite a scary moment, to be honest. So it's a lot of it is situational awareness and a confidence in yourself, having good reflexes, and just that drive to keep going each day. Because there are days when you'll be cleaning out and you've cleaned out most of the animals, you're hot, you're sweaty, you've been in the hot room, and you're rushing, and the temptation just to go and sit in the office with the aircon on is so nice some days, but you have to keep forcing yourself to carry on. And given the nature of the work as well, it's less team-based work and more individually motivating yourself. And that, for me, drives back to the care and welfare of my animals. So there are days when you just don't want to do it. Hands down, same with most jobs. You wake up, you're not feeling it. But unfortunately, you don't get an off day. So you then start going through, what can I do that's easier? So you might work with the smaller snakes or the snakes that you know are more calm. And you get to a point where it's almost like muscle memory, so that you're not taxing yourself, but you're still doing your work. It's quite varied, and the tools that we use, you get so familiar with them that you can almost do it as second nature. But if you're not paying attention for long enough, then accidents can happen. So you can't switch off, but you also go into an autopilot where you're doing it, and it's making sure that you can pull yourself out when you need to, that you're always prepared and aware for something else to happen. Or, for example, a home office inspector could turn up in the middle of cleaning an animal, and you suddenly panic because your facility isn't clean, but then you're a working animal facility, so you've got to talk with the inspector, and it could be that you've planned to do 2 hours in this room, and then everything goes wrong, and then the rest of your week is pushed back. So it's that time management again that plays into it. It does massively vary though, each person, and even down to the handling ability of each person. Speaking with other herpetologists, especially venomous herpetologists, there's almost a sense that you either have the ability or you don't. So you could pick up a hook and you go and you successfully work the animal, and it might not be the best skills, but you've done it. You've got over that first hurdle, but you kind of naturally have an idea of how to work with the animal. So you haven't got that kind of innate fear, which comes with most reptiles. I'll be honest. When I first handled a snake, I was a bit uneasy. It has no legs. It's scaly. It feels weird. But you get over that, and it's almost like you empathize with the animal in a manner that works with you both working with each other to kind of get the procedure done. And then obviously the more you work with them, you'll find most snakes don't want to be handled. They can put up fights, and you just become more and more confident through those skills. But that kind of first handling experience, it does have a feel of you either have it or you don't. You can practice for hours and hours, and you will get the skills, but you can tell. I couldn't really describe it, but you can tell when someone has that natural ability and someone has learned that ability. But it massively varies depending on what you're doing each day. And then the other side of my job being the research side, so I work with the mice. That's a completely different skill set and a completely different environment. And that in itself draws from completely different skill sets, but combining the two, So it could be the knowledge under ASPR, or just basic knowledge and interest about snakes. So it's picking and choosing various different skills from a wide range of areas. So even working in a pub under that high pressure, fast environment, that helped me massively with my own confidence. Coming out of college, knowing that I could deal with most things, so Saturday nights in the Wetherspoons, quite hectic, more so than cleaning out some venomous snakes. So that kind of working under the pressure, the time constraints, and working quickly and safely and stuff within SOPs, safety guidelines, risk assessments, and making sure that you're still getting all your work done at the end of the day. So it's juggling lots of different things at once effectively.
How would you describe the industry, the profession of working with venomous snakes as you do? How would you describe it nowadays?
Very narrow. There's not really many facilities that work with venomous snakes for venom extractions and milking snakes effectively. So they're normally referred to as venom production lines. There's a few well-known ones around the world. So you've got stuff like Kentucky Reptile Zoo, Bioken out in Kenya. But in general, there's not many facilities like it. And within those facilities, you're quite insulated as well. So we've got our academic connections around the world that we work with quite well. But even then, it's not many of them have a herbitarium attached. And then not many of them have that where they're extracting venom from it, or they're extracting venom purely for anti-venom production. Whereas we are a research-based herbitarium. So we do extract venom, but it's mainly going into our research and distributed to researchers across the world. The other side of it being the more commercial side. So you've got facilities like Le Toxin in France, which commercially sell venom. And researchers can buy it. It can be used in anti-venom productions. But as a whole, it's a very limited and small field as an industry as such. We at STM, we don't sell our venom. We typically give it away to researchers when they want to. But in itself, venom is quite an expensive thing. It's about £2,000 for a gram of venom. So it attracts a lot of people who want to set up their own facility because they've got an interest in venomous, or they've got a collection of venomous at home. They want to extract venom and sell it. Now you can extract venom anywhere. To be honest, you can. You just remove the venom and that's it. It's processing the venom and having the right equipment to make sure that it's still, for example, frozen immediately after you extract it, and then freeze dried properly. And stored properly, and knowing that you can test it in various manners. So unfortunately, within kind of a venom extraction industry, you've got a commercial side, you've got a research side, and then you've got almost like hobbyists who want to get into the field because it's £2,000 a gram of venom, and I'll just sell my venom everywhere. When in reality, most of the research done is on. Most of our researchers will ask for 10 milligrams of venom. So you might get a stockpile of 25 grams, but you're never selling it. So we've got challenges of people trying to set up their own facilities. You'll see it a lot with scorpion venom. Unfortunately, in places like Iran, people have been setting up scorpion venom farms because there was a video that said scorpion venom, a litre of scorpion venom is like £30 million. But you can get a litre of venom, no one's going to buy it off you. So you've got a commercial side that is established, you've got a research side, and then you've got this weird little hobby section in the middle that try and reach out into the venom industry, but there's just not a demand for it. That's the best way to put it. There isn't a demand for the amount of venom that's extracted already. It's used, obviously, but if there was a higher demand, you'd see more facilities like ours. In reality, there's only a handful across the world. And even then, how far that venom is actually going varies. So in Brazil, there's a facility called the Institute Butantan, and they're in anti-venom production. So they extract their own venom. whereas we will extract the venom for research, and we collaborate with various people around the world to then, for example, test that antivenom on different venoms. But in general, with the way that the antivenom production and the research into antivenom is going, in about 20 years, we might be seeing a complete lack of need for crude venom. We're already at a stage where we're growing organoids, not we personally. In the Netherlands, they took some venom glands off snakes. So obviously snakes were euthanized, venom glands were taken. And they managed to grow these effectively. They've grown them in test tubes, and they are producing a secretion. We're not sure if it's complete venom yet, if it's the same. But as this gets more and more studied, the need for crude venom and the need for live snakes will decline. And while it is my whole career, it would be quite nice to see potentially within the next 20, 30 years a wind down of the need for crude venom from live snakes. So effectively, my industry is probably dying, but in a really good way, in a sense that we won't need the crude venom anymore within the next couple of decades, we hope.
That's absolutely fascinating. The next question is, Ed, how do you see it progressing into the future? I mean, for example, do you see, I think you mentioned at the start that the snakes you work with are wild sourced. Do you see that aspect of it changing? What do you see changing in future? And another question, do you take volunteers?
We get asked that a lot, unfortunately. Unfortunately, we don't regularly take any, especially with the current environment going on. And we're not exactly a teaching facility, so we do get quite a lot of people asking, can I come and do work experience with you, for example? And previously we did take on some work experience people, but it's not, I think there's a misconception about what the job actually is and how it works. So we aren't playing with snakes all day, every day. It's not like getting a snake out, playing in the procedure room and, or look at this cobra and stuff. It's mainly just cleaning out snakes, cleaning up the mess of those snakes, doing then the admin work on it, various research projects. So taking on a volunteer, unfortunately, most of them wouldn't be able to handle within the facility, both because of insurance and just for the safety of it. We don't know what your skills are. You might have handled someone's snake 20 years ago and say that you've got experience. So we've got to protect ourselves on that side. But at the same time, it's very limited what we can do with someone. For example, I've been at LSTM for 3 years and I've only done a handful of extractions because it's taken that long for me to fit into the role with all the different aspects of it, the husbandry aspects, the handling aspects, actually getting around to doing the training. It's a very long drawn out process. It's not at 2 o'clock here, we'll do all this training, you'll be signed off. It could be a year worth of doing the same procedure before you're signed off. So getting volunteers in is not really practical. We do open the herpetarium to the public quite a lot. So we do a lot of public engagement where we'll have people touring the herpetarium, different students. We've had the MOD doing tropical medicine courses at the uni who come and see the snakes and stuff. We get VIPs. So we've had ministers who have come and toured the university and come and look at the snakes. And we're a great attraction in that sense that come and have a look. And this is a facility with 52 different species. So we do a lot of public engagement, but the actual volunteering side is it's very tricky to get through all the hoops and stuff, so people can come and see how we work, but actually working within there is quite difficult. And then your first question was about the wild caught snakes.
Yeah, how do you see sorry to interrupt you. So the first question was, how do you see? I'm trying in my head to encapsulate in 3 words your profession, but it's really complicated to do.
There is.
You're I was going to say you're a venomous herpetologist. You're a herpetologist with venomous snakes. In Liverpool School of Tropical Medicine, an extremely unique, genuinely unique facility, at an international level. Wow, I don't say that sentence every day.
No, it's very unique. Yeah.
How do you see it progressing? I mean, do you see snakes being captive bred more, or is wild caught still necessary? What do you see?
Normally, within the pet trade, within captive animals, you want captive bred. You don't want to take from the wild. I personally, if I was getting any animals for myself, I would avoid wild caught. It's not something that we should be doing when we've got such a range of species readily captive bred in for example, the reptile hobby. I personally feel we have more than enough species that we shouldn't be bringing wild caught animals in. But this is the but that kind of catches me out from that part. For venom research, the venom variation and composition can change depending based on locality, based on diet, genetics. So venom variation is a big thing that we're studying. And the more we learn, the more we realize how variable venom is. And one of the fears is that by using captive bred animals, you're mixing localities, you haven't got a clear lineage for those animals. So if I went over to Ham for the reptile show in Ham in Germany, for example, and went and brought 50 new snakes that were captive bred, I might get some information on them. But if we're being realistic, most of the captive bred animals, we don't have clear lineages for. They're quite mucky if you talk about the genetics of them. So if we then take those captive bred animals and start doing research on those, their venom might be completely different from what a wild animal is. And if we start doing all this research on captive animals, where suddenly we find this great new thing in this venom, but it's not actually seen on the ground, is counterproductive. So unfortunately, the best source for us is wild caught animals. We need the accurate representation of what's biting people. That's what our research focuses on, to improve the lives of people bitten by snakes. So if we were doing research on effectively the wrong venom, it's a waste of money and time for us. So unfortunately for us, wild caught is almost necessary for us to produce the best quality research we can. Now, the more we have learned, so there was a paper released 2019, I'm going to say. I think it was the tail end of 2019 that showed in pygmy rattlesnakes, so Cistoris, that the venom variation, we know it's mainly driven by prey. So the venom is designed to hunt. It's not designed to hurt people, it's designed to hunt. Spitting cobras are a bit different there, but they're a bit unique. So the venom is designed for their prey. Unfortunately, if they prey on, we say, mammals, we kind of get affected quite badly by it, as not on purpose, but it's kind of the same system that's used. So we need those animals that are biting on the ground to give us that representation. But within the Cistoris population that was in the study, they found that the venom can change by the prey. So certain ones were preying on, I think it was brown animals, and the others were preying on green animals or something like that. And even though that they were in the same location, their venom was different because it was for their prey. Now we see, if I take puff adders, for example, so Bitis aritans, widely distributed across the whole of Africa and into some of the Gulf regions. They're one of the snakes that causes quite horrific pathologies. So they've got a very cytotoxic venom. It destroys tissue and muscles. It's very painful. And they're the cause of a lot of amputations across sub-Saharan Africa, unfortunately. But if you look at the different localities, so if we take Nigeria, Kenya, and South Africa, if you compare their venoms, they're wildly different. So if we were only taking snakes from one locality as well, so say we only collected Kenyan snakes, and we did all our research on Kenyan snakes, we could benefit potentially East Africa, or where those snakes come from, and some cross-reactivity with other localities. We would again be, it's like taking a couple of steps back, where we need all of these different locations, different age snakes, different sexes, just to get a more complete view of the venom composition that we're dealing with. So unfortunately, wild caught snakes are a big part of the industry. There are facilities that do use captive bred animals, especially on venom production lines, just so they can keep restocking their venom production line. But for us, we need those wild caught animals, which in itself adds a lot of challenges. So that could be imports. Importing snakes is quite difficult. Importing snakes for not private keeping is even harder. So we've got various different laws and hoops that we have to jump through. So you need usually some sort of academic collaboration in country. You need to put all your imports in. You need to pay for the flights, veterinary checks, and also you need the links with the local community to collect your snakes. Now, anyone who's dealt with an import is likely going to have dealt with some pretty poor looking snakes, unfortunately. Now, the problem with bringing them in as wild caught animals is we'll only get a shipment in every few years. The last big shipment we had at LSCM was 2014, and the bulk of our collection is off that import. But we're unlikely to get another import in for a while because of the cost, which then means more care is needed on veterinary medicine, the veterinary side, keeping those animals healthy and really maximizing everything we can get out of them. So we're not bringing in constantly bringing in more animals. We're trying to minimize the amount we take, but maximize the amount we can get from them within the facility. So that kind of feeds back into the 3 R's again. We're trying to reduce as many as we can. We're trying to refine our procedures to really narrow down what we need without taking too many animals in from the wild. And then we're trying to replace where we can, so that the organoids are a good example of replacing the snakes. Now, it does have challenges. In an ideal world, we could just take captive bred animals, but unfortunately the challenges are there that we need to take wild caught. Now, hopefully, with the advancements that we're making in anti-venom production, venom production with the organoids and test tubes and stuff, we'll move away from the need for snakes altogether. Venomous snakes, that is. Still going to be a pet trade, obviously, but we're hoping we can move away from actual live animals down the line. That would be the ideal situation where we don't need the crude venom to produce the anti-venom. And if we can reach that point, then the need for the snakes in my kind of facility will pretty much disappear. And while it does sound a bit counterintuitive, it would be lovely to reach that point. It's my whole career. I love doing what I do. I love the interactions I get. But ultimately, if we can leave those snakes in the wild, that's the ultimate goal we can do. But until that point where we don't need crude venom anymore and we can reliably reproduce what we need in vitro or through other methods, wild snakes will be quite a cornerstone of accurate venom research. It's just when we get to a point where we won't need as many, and then obviously we keep lowering and lowering the amount we've got until basically a herbarium is non-existent.
This is absolutely intriguing. How easy is it to obtain veterinary care for the snakes?
Reptiles are very tricky in themselves. Being cold-blooded adds a number of challenges, but reptile veterinary is, if I'm being honest, it's rubbish. There's not much out there. It's very limited. Reptile veterinary for venomous, even harder. Finding a vet who is comfortable around venomous in itself is something. Finding a vet who has good knowledge of exotics is even harder. Because we're a Home Office accredited facility, we have to have a named vet anyway. So we have a named veterinary surgeon attached to our school, attached to the unit effectively, that I can reach out to and send him an email and say, I've got this problem, can you advise me? But a lot of the veterinary care falls to me and Paul, my colleague. where we'll contact the vet for advice where we need it, or he'll sometimes come and see the animals and do the procedure. But it relies on us and our skills to handle the animal safely. And this could mean that you need to pin and hold an animal, for example, a black mamba while it's getting injections. Snake's not going to like it. And I've got so much trust in Paul because he holds the head end while I do the procedure. So you need that trust in someone else, that if you were just to walk into a veterinary practice, like with a dog, you can take your dog in, here's my dog, I'll stand in the room, if you need me to hold the dog, you do your thing. You can't really do the same with a venomous snake. You've got to have so many procedures in place to make it safe. And then, for example, if you need surgery, it becomes such a challenging thing to do because of the cold-blooded nature of reptiles. So they don't react to anesthesia the same way that you'd expect a mammal to. So I can anesthetize a mouse with ease. That is straightforward. Anesthetizing a snake, I've not had to do it yet. I'm very glad I've not had to do it yet. It's such a challenge in itself that you have to try and find other ways around it before you get there. So it's a lot of problem solving. And even within, for example, if you're treating for a respiratory infection within a snake, the administration of antibiotics, you can give them orally, but then you've got to consider that you've got fangs that are right by your finger as you're putting a tube down a snake's throat. And typically you'll need to do that multiple times, say for 2 weeks, every other day. That snake's not going to like it. So each time you have to get that animal out, it's going to be even more difficult to handle. It's going to put up a fight. Occasionally, they don't put up too much of a fight. It happens every so often where one of them will just accept it's happening. It's glorious when it does, but you can't then go into a false sense of security that the snake's fine. If you've got, for example, a snake that's just come in from the wild and is covered in ticks, we need to remove those ticks. If you've got a snake that's got, for example, a damaged jaw, are you able to actually fix that, or are you just kind of mitigating the problems down the road? And even then, within reptiles, typically, especially snakes, if you see a snake that's ill, it's typically really ill. They hide their illnesses so well. So you've got to really keep an eye on them. So it could just be that, for an example, I walked by one of my puff adders. I'll use them again. They're easy to point out. But if I walk by my puff adder and I've not seen, like it normally sits out all the time and it's not set out for a few days, then I will check that animal just to see if it's just decided to move or if there's something wrong with it, if there's something different. Because it could be the fact that just because it's hidden, now it's trying to hide something that's wrong with it. So it is knowing all your animals within the facility. And even then, they've got their own personalities. So each of the snake has their personality that you know, and then they'll have good days and bad days. And then it's learning what a good day looks like, a bad day looks like, what illness looks like. So another example would be mambas have got very delicate mouths. Sounds a bit weird, but their fangs are very delicate. So you've got to be very careful of the membrane that you use over the pot when you're extracting from them. And you're constantly looking at the mouth just to see if there's any kind of swelling or slight gaping. It could be as little as just a slight gape in the mouth, that when you open it up, there's a huge infection in the mouth you would never have seen. But because of the slight movement in the mouth, that's why you then investigate further. Or you'll be listening in a room full of other snakes for this one little wheezing sound that could indicate that there's a respiratory infection. So you do a lot of proactive veterinary care, like raising the temperatures, lowering humidity, before getting actually hands-on. But even then, you've got to be prepared to, for example, if you've got an issue with a snake that's got shed still stuck on its head, you need to get in there with tweezers. But you've got to be very considerate of how small those tweezers are, how close your fingers are on those tweezers to that snake's mouth. Has it got big fangs? Because a snake can look really calm and then suddenly it just opens its mouth and turns its head. And if you're not careful, your finger's going to be there. I've got quite big hands as well, so it doesn't help with small tools to get quite intricately in. So it's all these different aspects you've got to consider, and then even down to how you go about treating them. You don't have the same breadth of knowledge that you would, for example, a dog. We've got so much veterinary information about dogs that you can search online and find it. If you try and search veterinary medicine, it's typically anecdotal from other people on forums and stuff, and reading what they'd put and seeing how they've discussed it, how they treated it. So it almost takes a lot more effort to find an answer with reptile veterinary. It's a very important part, but it's very challenging because there's just not enough information out there yet. It's growing with the expansion of exotic animals as pets. That has driven more veterinary medicine, obviously, and it has helped us so we can use examples of non-venomous to help try and diagnose our venomous animals. They are still snakes, but it has a lot more challenges than just treating basic illness because of the venomous side of them. And then even then, you're always learning on the job. So the amount of times I've seen something new on a snake, and I thought I've seen it bad, and then you see this one, and you're like, oh, okay, that was actually really mild compared to this. How the hell am I going to treat this? Because that was quite a challenge. It's a lot of thinking on your feet, new ideas, consulting with a lot of people as well, asking different people with experience. I've got a small group of friends who will have kept venomous or do keep venomous privately. And the amount of times I pop in there like, guys, have you ever seen this before? Because I have no clue what I'm doing right now. And we'd all discuss it in there, and someone might say, oh yeah, I've seen this in this species here. We did it this way. Is that feasible for us? Is it something we need to try? So a lot of it is effectively just discussion and research, reading other people's experiences and trying to apply it to your own situation, and then using that knowledge that you've just gained, tying it into the other knowledge you know about the reptile veterinary side of it. And it's this kind of growing expanse of treating various individuals that build this better idea of what we can do veterinary medicine in a veterinary medicine kind of way. And obviously discussing it with our vet, who will he encourages quite a lot from us. One of the nice things is if I email him saying, I think I've got this problem, I don't think it's, for example, egg bound. I don't think the snake's egg bound. It doesn't feel like it. It might be constipated. And the vet will respond like, if you don't think it's this, we'll look at going down this manner. So it's quite nice having that trust from him. But on the other side of it, having that trust means I've got to be quite sure on what I'm saying. Because if it is wrong, and it was something that was easily diagnosed that I've got wrong, it falls back on me. So there is a lot of it's mainly a lot of discussion and unfortunately trial and error and wait and see with reptiles. Normally with mammals you want quick interventions, but with reptiles sometimes you can go in and they look on death's door, and then the next day you go in and they're perfectly fine. They just didn't feel well that day. So you can't jump to conclusions, but you've also got to be prepared to act quickly, but also wait and see and juggle the two and see how it goes. It is effectively constantly learning. That's the best way I can put it. For the veterinary side, it's such a challenging discipline, but a lot of it can be fixed practically. With reptiles, they're very hardy animals. They can take a lot. They can be really ill, and you'd never know until it's too late, and then suddenly you see the signs of illness. So then you'll learn from that by doing the post-mortem. You learn new things, and it is just constantly learning new techniques, other people's experience, and how you apply that to your own situation and stuff. It would be nice if we had a much more comprehensive, like veterinary medicine dictionary or whatever you want to call it, guidebook that covered reptiles properly. In reality, there's only a couple, and even then, they're aimed at veterinary level. I'm not trained at that level. I've got an interest, but reading those textbooks can be quite difficult as well. So it's interpreting the information in the best possible manner to your situation, and then just go from there.
Absolutely fascinating. I've said that before. I've got no problem saying it again. Absolutely fascinating. Brilliant. Is there anything else that you'd like to add? Did you say you have a podcast, or do you have any visual aids with you?
So yeah, with the group of friends I previously mentioned, we do a podcast on. It started out as snakebite, so we were just talking to various people who work in snakebite across the world, and just trying to give people a platform. So with my job, I'm very passionate about the snakebite crisis, but a couple of my friends, so that it was set up by a friend called Ross, who through me had learned. I'd like to say through me, had learned a bit more about snakebite than he previously did. And there seems to be this kind of trend when you learn about the snakebite crisis and suddenly you're kind of like, wow, that's not many people speaking about that. Why is it not spoken about much? And you want to kind of talk about it. And that's what happened with Ross. And he wanted to set up a podcast, so we did. We started off with snakebite. So we've spoken to some of my personal heroes, if I'm honest. Some of the big names I never thought I'd get to speak to, and then suddenly I'm just chatting with them on a podcast. And we branched out after we set out to kind of give a platform to people who didn't really get to speak about the work they do. So it might be a snakebite initiative in the middle of Tanzania or something like that. You don't hear about them, but they do such great work. And part of it was just we wanted to allow them to talk about themselves a little bit and get the message out. And it went pretty well. And we've expanded it, so we cover a lot more kind of venomous elements. We've spoken about slow loris and their venom, which was fascinating, actually. I never knew about it. And then we managed to get a professor on, Anna Nicoris, I believe her name was, from Oxford, and she was speaking about slow lorises, and all of us in our group chat were all sending messages like, I'm gobsmacked. I don't know what to say. We're meant to be doing an interview here, and we're all gobsmacked listening. Like, so, you just said that. Can you just talk more about that? And it allowed us to really pursue that common interest that we've got and speak to some amazing people. We have taken a bit of a break throughout lockdown. We wanted to do so much, and then we just didn't. So we're coming back in, aiming to come back in summer for. We're calling it a third season. It's basically picking up where we didn't carry on. But the podcast is called Word on the Snakevine. And it does cover so many different elements of not just snakebite, but it does really highlight some of the stories behind snakebite, and the passion for the people who do that work every day, day in and day out. I'm gobsmacked by some of the drive that some of these people have. The situations they put themselves in for the betterment of others and stuff. It really is amazing to be able to speak to them and give them that platform. So yeah, that is the podcast that we do. It started off as a little side piece, but it actually went really well. And Russ managed to give a talk at a conference. It must have been 2019 now. Yeah, back when conferences were still a thing in person. Out in Holland at Burgess Zoo. So he managed to do a talk on the podcast there as just a different avenue of sharing information. Unfortunately, there's quite a divide between academia and general kind of hobbyist people with interests. The language of published papers, for example, it's my job, I get paid to do it, and reading papers can be so boring. They tempt you in with a really nice abstract. They think you've got this great paper, and then you're reading it and you're halfway through and you just, why am I doing this? And it's my job, I'm paid to do it. Well, not necessarily read papers, but I'm paid to do this kind of work. So one of the motivations we had was just being able to disseminate the information easily. So it's not like completely low level. It's still quite high discussions, but discussing it in a way that makes it accessible to a lot of people. Science communication being something I didn't think I would be involved in, but I ended up through our public engagement having to do quite a lot of it. And I do really enjoy that aspect of taking the science and communicate it in a way that makes it a bit more accessible for people who might have an interest, but you pick up a published paper. If you're not used to that and you start trying to read it, the language of how it's written, the manner it is, the paywalls, the amount of paywalls that you have to hide behind, just to get access to this. So that allowed us to kind of, don't want to say bridge a gap, but effectively bridge a gap between academia and the hobby. And through that, we have had some amazing conversations with some people I never thought I'd get to meet, let alone talk with in that manner. And we've spoken with people all over the world, so pretty much covered everywhere. I think we've had, all the continents bar Antarctica. So we've spoken with the Australian, American, etc., all the different avenues that they work in different conservation aspects as well. So we did branch out, and it has been really successful, luckily. But that came off the back of just wanting people to know about snakebite. And luckily it did succeed. It was not something I ever expected to go far, but it luckily did. So yeah, we're really lucky to have that and to speak to people, and then off the back of it, see the response from people who may never have thought about snakebite as a crisis. I know I never did before I started working at STM. It was people get bitten by snakes, but you don't really think about it. And then you kind of learn that on average, it's about 130,000 people a year die from snake bites. And over 500,000 are permanently disabled in various different manners. And if you look at the neglected tropical disease list from the WHO, snakebite is basically second to malaria in deaths, but you never hear about it. And it's affecting the most impoverished people in, unfortunately, the most impoverished communities are the ones who are most susceptible. So you look at, for example, North America. Yeah, they've got lots of venomous snakes, but not many people die. I think it's only between 10 and 20 die a year in North America. If you then look at Africa, we estimate about 32,000 people die a year. And that's conservative numbers because we just don't know the true figures, unfortunately. You've got countries that don't report snake bites as snake bites. You'll have people who are bitten by snakes and never make it to a hospital. You'll have people who are bitten by snakes in their sleep, and then they might not wake up. And then it might have been an elderly person, no post-mortem done, for example, or not looking for snake bite, and then unfortunately they're just not recorded. So that drive behind it was just to give people some awareness and really broach the topic of snakebite in a manner that wasn't purely academic. It was more of a discussion that you could listen into, and hearing the passion behind the people who do it. It can be a very heavy topic. Unfortunately, it's the nature of it is quite horrible when you hear these people talk about the experiences. And it's typically when you realize how many, for example, kids are bitten by no fault of their own. They could just be sleeping in their bed and they're bitten by a spitting cobra that's mistaking them for food, or just seeing what it is, giving it a bite, see if it's food. Like we know sharks will taste with their mouths, they haven't got hands, so they might just see if it's food. But unfortunately, because of the venom injecting this kid may now be disfigured for the rest of its life. And hearing those stories from the people who are dealing with it really is eye-opening, but it gives you a sense of perspective that actually, outside of my nice bubble, my comfortable Western lifestyle, there is a lot of suffering off the back of people who have no choice. And it's trying to just make that awareness there. It's not trying to fundraise or anything like that. It's just making people aware of the actual problem. And from there, we can then get it more general. So instead of me saying, oh yeah, I worked on snakebite, and then have to go through the whole snakebites, this isn't the problem. It might be like malaria, where we know it's a big problem, but it doesn't affect us. So if we can just get that awareness, that would be a big help anyway. And then hopefully the more awareness we get, the more funding we get. The WHO did respond effectively in 2018, I believe. They released a roadmap to reducing 50% of the snakebite deaths by 2030. That was hugely ambitious. Most of the people who writ it have subsequently released papers saying how it can't be done through the cost of antivenom and various other issues like the treatment of people. So if we reduce the deaths, we now have a lot more people who need long-term care that will put a further burden on a very broken healthcare system already. So yeah, we might be saving 60, 70,000 lives, but how many of those 70,000 lives are potentially going to be worse off, unfortunately, and it does sound quite bad, where they can't actually access the hospital care anymore because it's so overburdened with survivors. So while we need to reduce the mortality, we also need to improve the treatments, which is being done now with the additional funding that we did receive from the Wellcome Trust, for example, opening an £80 million grant pot for snakebite, which was astonishing. That was huge news for us. The elevation of snakebite to an infectious tropical disease as well at the WHO. All of these things are just putting us out there a bit more. And then now that we are an infectious tropical disease, we can access some better funding, hopefully. I say that like it's pouring in. Obviously, with COVID, a lot of it's been diverted. So chasing funding is always a big problem. But when you've got your outputs, you demonstrate how good the funding goes to, how efficient it is, and how far it can go. Hopefully, we'll end up getting some more. But that's people above me who deal with the funding side of it. I just look after the snakes, luckily. And yeah, it's one of those things that off the back of my job, through the podcast as well, I've got such a better understanding as a result of those interactions. But I've made great friends off the back of it, and the podcast does great work. So it has been a fantastic avenue to go down. And I can talk about a few other tools that I got. So obviously I'm not in work, but I do have a couple of tools here. So I've got an example of some handling. So this is one of the snake hooks that we use. This is the one that I use personally. You become very attached to your hook. I don't know if that's showing. So it's 90 centimeters, I believe, or about a meter hook. This is a standard hook that I use every day. You effectively want it to become a second part. It's an extension of your arm. You need to be so comfortable with that hook because this is where the snake sits. This is how you control the snake. This is your lifeline between you and that snake. So you want to be comfortable. You want solid build. This is one of the hooks that Paul got from a company called Vermont in America. They've shut down since 20 years ago, I think. Now, unfortunately, I've never found a hook that's as good as this one. So this is my only hook, and it's still Paul's, but this is the one that I use every day. I've asked for recommendations from other people for different equipment. They all come back with the same companies, but they're just not as good. They're not as comfortable. This one's nice and light. It spins really well. So like I spend most of my day spinning my hook like that in my hand. So I don't know if it comes up very well, but I'll be doing this all the time. Just it's that comfortableness, knowing when your balance is, being really comfortable with your tool. Now that's not ideal for your smaller snakes. We've got smaller examples like that. That's a 60 centimeter hook. We've also got some 30 centimeters that we use, but I really enjoy this one. So again, that kind of balance, you need to know where you're feeling. So I'll normally hold it about here. And that gives me such a nice reach. I can twist it nicely in my fingers. And the smaller hook here, it's just so much easier to work with the smaller snakes. So we've got various different hooks. We've got some shorter but stockier ones for heavier bodied small snakes. This one I'd use for most of the small snakes, and then I'd use my bigger one. And then another tool that we use daily would be these bowl forceps. So obviously you don't want to be putting your hand in a box with a venomous snake. It's never a good idea. So for small water changes, we'll use tools like this. Standard bowl forceps. See if I got it. So you just use them. You can pick stuff up really easily, and they're great for feeding small animals. So you can pick it up. You can change your water bowls. You can change your hides, the direction of them as well. They're just really good for keeping your hand out of the range of the snake and you've got something you can reach in really easy and just change. They fit comfortably in your hand. So they're like the main three tools that I'll be using at work every day. And then for extractions, we've done a lot of refinements. Paul has done a lot of refinements over his 28 years. When you pin snakes, previously a lot of people pin with the end of the hook. They'll use, for example, this part So if that's the snake, they'll use that part like that, and they'll pin there. Now the problem is it's solid metal, and you're pushing on a snake's neck. The last thing you want to do is damage the snake, hurt the snake, break any bones. So what we use is a tool called the jigger, which is a long pipe with a rubber thing on the end here. This is actually an Apple Watch strap that we repurposed. That actually works fantastically. So it's got enough give there. So when you use it on a snake, it bends up. And we also use effectively a camping mat underneath on our floor. So when we pin the animals, we'll pin using this. There's two of us on a mat, so they've got mat padding underneath, and then this soft on top. And then when you've got this behind the animal's head, you can go in and pick them up. I wouldn't recommend doing that. It's a lot of it is about the feel of the animal as well. But we use these on all our animals. We've got two, so your second assistant will have one as well. What you can do is, for example, if that finger's the snake's head and you've got one here, it's too low down, but the snake can't move, so then someone else can come with a second one and get the head pinned. It just allows us to be a lot more versatile with how we pin our animals, and very safely. The last thing we want to do is damage them, so we've got mats underneath and a soft rubber there. So you might see it there, it bends in quite a lot. So then you're not breaking anything. Now the problem with these are you've only got a thin strap, and certain snakes like vipers will spin a lot. So puff adders again, rattlesnakes are notorious for it, where if you put pressure on them, they'll spin. And it's a natural defense, but if they were grabbed and they start spinning around, they could potentially turn around, bite the animal, they could get free. But if you've pinned the animal down, well, with a hook or with this, and it starts spinning, but its neck doesn't go with it, they're prone to breaking their back, unfortunately. And the last thing we want to do is to hurt an animal in that sense. And if you break an animal's back, especially snakes, likelihood is it's not going to survive. It needs euthanizing. So Paul came up with a very simple. It's going back to that practicality idea. You just make things up out thinner. So this is half a pipe on a rake handle that he made in his shed with some neoprene in. And it doesn't look like much. That's literally the tool. But what you do is, if you've got a snake here, you'll put this like along the spine, and you hold the spine in place. So someone will be holding this part and putting the pressure down. So the top end can move, but that body's stuck under there. Then you put your jigger down. I need like 4 hands to show this properly, but we'd use that to restrain the animal safely. And that helps us to not have such a stressed out animal. The likelihood of breaking the back is much, much slimmer. And because you straighten them out and you pin them on the back, the tail might flare about, but you don't need to worry about that. The body is straight. You can pin a lot safer, and it allows us to get the procedure done a lot quicker and safer. So it's this constant refinement that we're always doing, always finding new things. We might be in the middle of extractions, we might be in the middle of pinning, and we see something, we go, we need to sort that out. What are we doing? Oh, this mat slips, how are we going to change it? And you're constantly trying to find new ways to improve the equipment you've got, just to maximize the safety of the animals. But the drain pipe, we just call it the drain pipe tool. But that, as simple as it is, made in a shed 20 odd years ago, 25 years ago, that's used constantly to this day. We made a couple more that we gave out some to our facilities in Africa, to where they're extracting, and we made a couple for ourselves. We've got a couple of different sizes that we can use, but it's little tools like that that really do help with the refinement to make it safer for the animals and for ourselves. But yeah, that's a selection of some of the tools that we'd use basically on a daily basis and for extractions. That for me, it's second nature. Normally, I've always got a hook twiddling it about in my hands or carrying it on my shoulder, and sometimes I really question why I do it, but it's just so second nature because I'm so comfortable with that hook. I know where it is. I know where I am. But suddenly you're using someone else's hook or a different hook. So we've got spare hooks, emergency hooks all over the place in each snake room, just in case, whatever, there's a snake out and you haven't got a hook. We haven't had an escape in, I think it's over 10 years now, but just in case. Or certain snakes, like mambas, for example, arboreal snakes, like to climb up hooks. So you could have a case where you're handing a snake and it's just come straight up the hook towards your hand and you drop it. It's a horrible feeling being without a hook, but knowing you've got a spare one behind you that you can grab. But then the problem is it's not your hook. So we've got hooks around the facility. I can use them. I can hook perfectly fine with them, but they're not my hook. It's not that comfortable one. It's the same with these small ones. We've got so many different little ones, but since getting these ones in, they're so versatile for everything. You've got the length of both sides. They become your comfortable hook, and that's what you feel comfortable with. And suddenly, when you haven't got it, you can still do your job, but it's not as comfortable. It's not as, you don't feel as secure sometimes with someone else's equipment. Again, it's just part of, for me, it's my daily thing. I'll go in, start cleaning out, grab my hook. It comes with me everywhere. Even when I'm working with the small snakes, that hook is in the room with me. Might be on the other side of the room, but it's there. It's always being carried about. And it's just tools of the trade effectively for us to keep us safe.
And can you repeat the name of the podcast, Ed, please?
Word on the Snake Vine.
Word on the Snake Vine. I love it.
Yeah.
Edouard Crittenden, herpetologist and animal technician at the Centre for Snakebite Research and Interventions. Thank you very much for being on the Practical Animal Channel.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you.
It's been my pleasure. Thanks very much, Ed.
Cheers.